Hey guys, I welcome you all back to our channel Half. So in this session, we'll be looking to the formal ways of aligning of a text widget. Okay, so we'll be looking to some small widget attributes that helps us to present our text widget a bit more elegant. That is just to give you an idea. Okay, so before moving further, I just want to cover one more concept that I failed to cover you in the previous episode. That is the warning that we saw in the class. Okay, so what this warning states is when you look into this warning, it says that our class is declared immutable, but the property or field that is present inside that class, it's not marked as final. So what it states is we got this property question for this class, we haven't declared it final. So why should you declare it final, and what is the necessity of final? Okay, so this final keyword instructs your Flutter SDK that this particular property of this class, the value present inside, can't be changed once assigned. This sounds like the value will be static. Okay, so when you declare final and when you say that to your SDK that the value of that variable shouldn't change, then it's like defining the value forever. It's static, right? So this particular question should be dynamic. So then how the value of the question will change here? That should be a next question. In this, what you got to observe is the values are obtained through the constructor of that class. Here we can change the value via the constructor. Okay, so this final will only restrict the change of values from other methods apart from accessing through this constructor. Okay, so within the same file, if some other program try to change the value of the question, it won't work. So that's the purpose of the final keyword. Okay, so it just allows the value to be changed only via constructor. That helps you to reduce some bugs at times. It's just to give you an idea what is the purpose of the final keyword. So now let's move to aligning our text widget bit more looking good. So let's begin our styling by changing the style of the text that is present inside the text widget. So in order to do that, we'll be making use of a property called style. It's present inside the text widget. This style is a property of the text widget, and to this style we'll be passing a widget called text style. This helps us to style our text. The moment when you type font inside, you could see the options popping out. We got a lot of options inside in order to change the font size, style, family fallback, and etc stuff. Now let's get into size, the very basic. So you could manipulate the size of the font whatever you want, however you feel to present. You can change it just by changing the number here. The moment you change the number, you could see the difference in here. In order to give you significant difference, let's say let I keep this to 50. Now it will be in mega size. You could see here it's in super mega size. Okay, so this is to change the style of your text. You're trying to increase the font size. Remember, everything is a widget in Flutter, and all the widgets are arranged in the form of trees. So here you should understand that you are assigning value 20 to the property of the text style widget, which is again being passed to text widget, then again it's being passed to build. Okay, so everything is like routing towards the root. Okay, so in the end, your entire application will, the app that you're developing, it will be in the root node. So you got to understand this constantly so that it helps you to understand how you are routing all your widgets. Okay, so you got to keep this mind passive, and also make sure that you make use of this commas after passing an argument. This helps you to auto indent your code, and the shortcut for auto indenting is Control Alt L. Okay, so don't forget that. So very next thing that we are going to do is we are going to align the text. Okay, so in order to do that, we make use of a property called text align. So again, the moment when you type the keyword text, this again pops up. So to this text align, we pass a value called text align. The moment you enter align, you could see that align.center, align.end, justify left, right. So this looks something similar that you saw if you have work experience with Microsoft Word kind of thing. You would have formatted your document, right? So this is something similar. Okay, so that's why Flutter is easy. Everything is like normal Word that we make use of. Here this text align.center, this helps us to center our widget in the app, but what happens is right now it won't work. You could see even though we make use of this text align, it don't work because the size of the application, it's so big. Technically we didn't occupy full screen. When we try to occupy maximum possible screen, we could see the difference. For that, let's get into the concept of container. Like I said, container helps you to bundle all your widgets, right? And it's an invisible widget. I would have gave you short introduction on invisible widgets about the rows and columns and containers. I would have told I would be covering containers shortly, so this is the time. So in order to push this entire widget inside the container, and in order to create container, we make use of keyword called container, and so this is the keyword that you use to create container. This is how you create container, and here here all we are doing is passing the entire widget inside this container. Now we have bundled this entire widget inside the container, and like all other invisible widgets, this container have a property called child. Okay, so only to this property you will be passing the widgets. This child property tells the Flutter SDK that container is holding some widget. Now you could see we have created a invisible widget. Even though we are making use of container, you don't see any difference because it's invisible. So in order to give us the impact of text align, let's make our container to occupy maximum width possible so that we see the difference. Okay, so in order to do that, we can assign the width of the container by making use of the width property that is present inside the container. And what I'm doing is I'm making use of a keyword called double infinity. This helps me to instruct my container to occupy as much as possible the width. The moment I assign this to my container, when I run the application, I could easily find the difference for my center thing. You could see everything is centered, right? So previously it was not centered. If I want to align this to some other position, let's say I want to align it to left, then I could see the difference. It's aligning to left. And if I want to align it to right or whatever you want, you can do it. So you can see the difference because you are instructing your container to occupy as much as width possible, and you have occupied the entire possible width because of this double infinity keyword. So I will give you short theoretical explanation about container, how it functions, and different parts inside the container so that you get some idea about the container. Let's have a brief introduction on container. Okay, so initially I'll try to describe the components of the container. So initially what we have is the widget. Okay, so we'll be passing the widget to the child property of the container, so that stands as the core of the container. Okay, so after that we'll be padding that widget. It may be left or right or however we want. So we saw that by aligning it to left, center, and we saw other justification properties. Okay, so all that falls under padding. So we got to set a limit to this padding, right? So that limit is being controlled by the border. So this border is the zone within which your widget can operate within. Inside a container you might hold multiple widgets. If that's the case, then you got to mention the entire container with some margin values, right? So this is like the exit, that is the boundary of the container. Okay, so the margin talks about the boundary of the container. Okay, so let's see how all these components are arranged. So like I said, this widget is in core. Okay, so this widget can be padded, so padding will be behind it. And in order to give a border, in order to define border for a widget, we make use of this border property, and it falls behind padding. And after that comes the margin. Okay, so the margin talks about controlling the occupying space of the container on the screen. So this is just to give you small idea about how container works and how to manipulate the container. So I hope so you got some brief idea on container. Now let's see how this container thing works in our application. So in order to give you a brief idea on the margin property of the container, let's try to give us some space over here. Okay, so when you give the margin value to the container, automatically all the stuff that are within, that is the borders and the padding and everything, whatever you have done, it will also go down, right? So everything will move along with the container, right? So in order to give you that idea, let's try to manipulate the value of the margin. Okay, in order to change the values of the margin for a container, we'll be making use of the property called margin. Again, this is present inside the container, and here there is something called edge insert. Okay, so I'm going to make use of this value right now. So what this edge insert all is, okay, so this helps me to define same value on all the sides of the container. So imagine this as an invisible box. Now I am instructing it to, let's say, push it to 30 pixels in all directions. So the value will be in terms of pixels. The moment when I enter 30, I think I could see some significant difference. So you could see some spacing in here, right? So that shows that the value of the margin has been defined and our container has been pushed bit down based on that. So we have given 30 pixels gap, okay, in all directions, so that our container is in such a way that it's evenly spaced in all directions, that is 30 pixels. This is to give you an idea on how to handle the margin. When you look at the dot in here, it looks like the multiple ways of writing different kind of constructors for a particular class. I would have taught you that when I was teaching you the basics of Dart. Back then, when you remember, I would have told that Dart won't support constructor overriding. Okay, so what I mean is you can't write same constructor with different parameters just to modify the working, but you can write different constructors based on different names. What is this edge insert is a constructor, but it has different types based on names. Okay, so I would have taught you how to write this kind of constructors when I was teaching you the basics of Dart. In order to get an idea, when you click control and when you click on this edge insert, you could see the developer's description of this constructor. Okay, so you could see there are different kinds of constructors. When for the same edge insert with the name type only, you have this kind of values. With all, you could see this kind of values, and there are a lot more constructors based on different names. Okay, so this is what I was talking about back then when I was teaching you the basics of constructors. This is just for your knowledge. So by now a question should pop up in your mind: how to find these kinds of keywords? Where do you learn? It's impossible for me to cover each and every keyword, but I could tell you where you can learn new keywords based on the project you are working. For that, you should look at Flutter documentation. So the moment you Google it, Flutter documentation, the very first link will redirect you to the official Flutter documentation, wherein you could find experts working in Flutter telling you how to use the widgets. Okay, so you could see widget catalog in here. When you click it, you could see different things: layout, scrolling, painting effect. There are a lot of things in here. Now currently we are working layer, right? So when you click on layout, you could see different stuffs: align, containers. Currently I was talking about containers in here. Okay, so when you go inside, there will be detailed documentation already with some explanation. Okay, so you would be having sample code. You could run this code and you could see the effects. Okay, so this is how you learn. This is how you explore new widgets and new value keywords. Again, this is for your knowledge. Coming back, now our next target is to give some coloring effect to the button here. Let's give some background color to the button, and let's take this concept of the button, that is the raise button widget, to some other Dart file and try to add the state, that is we have declared stateful widget. So let's try to add that property to other Dart file, that is keeping our parent file as intermediate to the child. Okay, so this parent file currently got one child file, that is custom widget. Let's add another child file and let's make it like an intermediate between the two children that particular main Dart file has. So right now it might sound confusing. Let's get inside and work it out for ourselves for a bit more clarity. Let's start our next target by creating our own file. So let's name our file as answer handle, maybe, whatever you want. Okay, so once it's created, we need to import our material.package. So we are importing it, and after that let's create our class. Let's name our class as answer because we are handling answers, right? So we can extend that to stateless widget. Since this is a widget class, we got to build something, right? So we are making use of this build function, and here we are returning container because the question will be inside the container when we take the answer script outside. Okay, so we want our answer buttons to move along with our question, right? So if we manage to do that inside the container with same physical properties, then it will work out, right? So that's why we are trying to put everything in the container. So what we are going to do is we are just removing this raise button concept in here. Okay, so in order to reduce lines of codes in our main file, and we are trying to create a separate Dart file to perform the action that is done by this raise button. So for that, let's cut this out and let's paste this inside this container. Okay, so since this is a container, then this should be inside children, right? Child. So now this thing is done. Let's initially set this as null, okay, like we did earlier. Now this thing is a null. Since we have made use of this QSN function here, we get this error. For now, let's make use of text. If we want to make use of QSN function, then we can import it from custom widget.dart. Okay, right right now let's make it with text button, and after that let's remove this, okay, for now. So now we have added the raise button inside this file. So let's import this file to our main file, this answer handle to our main.file file. In order to do that, let's make use of the import keyword and let's import it. Okay, so now we have linked our answer handle file here. So what's the name of the class here? Answer, right? So we can call our class here like this. We said we will be giving 3 choices, right? So let these 3 be the choices. Okay, so now we have done this. When you run this code, then this should give us, grayish appearance to our question. Yes, we got this grayish appearance in here because we didn't declare any functionality to this one. When we go to the main.file, you got to understand that whenever we increment, the state of the widget changes. So technically we are constructing a stateful widget when we consider the quiz app in overall, but this text widget needn't be a stateful widget. It should be a stateless widget because we are not changing internal state of the text widget. Okay, so how to pass that property, that is how to make sure to pass this function to this button. So that's pretty simple. Like other ways, other time when you handle the class, you would have passed the value to here. So similarly like that, we are going to declare a constructor here, but here what we are going to do is we are getting the functions instance itself as the value in the constructor. So by doing that, so we get this function one's instance, we pass that instance here, and we get that instance in this file, and when the user clicks on that file, the instance will trigger it, and in turn it will be routed back here and the function gets executed in here. So that's the plan. So let's see that. Okay, right now let's declare a variable of type function. Okay, so because we are going to get function kind of value, and let's name it as answer handler, whatever you want. Okay, I'm naming it like this. Okay, so we are going to create a constructor, and this is how we create a constructor, and we are assigning answer handler the value that we get through this, and we can pass it here. Okay, so now this thing is done. We got to pass the instance of that method, right? Okay, so we are passing it. Like I said, you should not pass along with the parenthesis because it will execute that instance when the particular statement is encountered by the parser. So you should just pass the plain name that you have given for that particular method. Then only it will get triggered only when the user has interaction with that. So right now when you try to execute it, okay, so our program should work as normal. When we see our emulator, yes, it's working. Okay, it's working normal. So let's give this widget the width that we previously thought of giving. I'm instructing this container to occupy as much width as possible, so I'm using the keyword double infinity. So if you execute this, you could see that the buttons are stretched out. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the buttons are stretched out. You could see that here, right? So our next goal is to give some background color to these buttons. In order to do that, let's go to the raise button, and this raise button got another property called color. Okay, so to this color we can pass a class called colors, and this class got some predefined values, names. Okay, that is if you want to access blue, you could just type blue and you could access the blue color. So all these values have been predefined in this colors class. So you could see that when you press control and click colors, you could see all these values. If for instance, if you make use of transparent keyword, you could get this color. So all these are static, and let's look into this constant keyword later. So we could find a lot of colors inside this class. Okay, so we are accessing blue color for now. When we reload it, we could see we get blue color, so that's good. And in order to give a cycling text change, what I have done is I have assigned 0. Initially we were having 2 here, so I changed it to 0 so that when I show you some difference, there is always some change. So our next goal is to get these questions and answers dynamically. So far what we have done is we have hard coded everything, that is we manually gave the questions and answer and all these text widgets, right? So let's try to make it dynamic. In this questions list, let's have some list of questions, and let's predefine some answers, and let the application itself handle it dynamically when we click on it. In order to do that, we got to understand a concept of map. Let's look into what is map. Maps are unique features that's available in Dart. Okay, so it's kind of like list that we saw earlier. Maps is also a feature that's available in Dart. So what this map does is it helps you to map some key with some set of values if you want so to make you understand a bit easier, so what we want here is we want to make sure that our questions that we ask, it's being mapped with some set of answers. Okay, so far we have been hard coding everything, that is we manually ask the questions. Okay, so here we, even though we got questions from list, when we look into the answers, we were hard coding our answers, right? So we want to handle it dynamically, and moreover, it's not necessary that one particular question have only like fixed 3 options. Some questions might have more number of options, some questions might have less number of options. So in order to give dynamic appeal to our application, okay, in order to handle the questions and answers dynamically, we can make use of maps. Okay, now that sounds cool. So how to access this map? So map can be accessed by making use of map keyword, okay, like this, but there is also another short way of doing that, is opening and closing curly braces. Okay, so now this is a shorthand way of declaring map. Okay, so inside map we got a key and it is being mapped with some set of values. Okay, so we got some key and we got some values. Okay, so before moving further, we need to name the key, right? So in our case, the key is questions and values are the answers. Okay, so we need to give a name for our key and for our value as well, and we need to give both of them with some values. For the value, we give answers as a value. For the key, we give question as the value. This is something like variable declaration, but don't confuse that with here. I just want to help you understand what I'm trying to convey. Okay, so let's say, what's your favorite color as our first question? That is a value for our first question. Before that, let's name our question. Let's name this as questions. We got to assign some value, and that can be done with the help of this colon, and inside this colon I'm asking this question. Now I have assigned what's your favorite color as the value to the questions key, and in the place of answers, that is a value, let's name my value as answer. Okay, so again I'm giving some set of values. In this case we have number of options, right? So I'm making use of list to give more number of options, and for favorite color, let me give 4 options. Okay, let me give black, blue, red and green. So to make it a bit more readable, let me use auto intender. Okay, so now we have created one map. Okay, so let's delete it. Let's say our application asks some 2 to 3 questions. Okay, so let me create 3 maps so that our application asks 3 questions. And the second question, let me ask it as what's your favorite animal, and for that let me give 5 options this time so that you can see the dynamicness in your application. Okay, so now we have given 5 options to this question, and let's say I give 2 options in my third question. Okay, so let me ask the age. Okay, so now our map is ready. Okay, so now our next question is, how are we going to map this with our widgets, because we were hard coding our displaying contents, right? So here for now, let's give it in text widget itself, and instead of accessing the elements like this, let us access our element with square brackets so that I could tell you these concepts easily. Okay, so now we want to access our question that is present inside this list here in the text widget. So how to do that? So it's simple. We can do it by adding one more square brackets, and we can point our key, that is the name that we have given here, there. Okay, so this should come along with the quotes. So what it means is you are telling your compiler that you should take the value, that is a string, from the map, that is the key. Okay, key of that map, and these are like sets. Okay, these are like elements of this list. Okay, so this entire thing is one element, this entire thing is one element, this entire everything is one element, so there are like 3 elements and you access it like from 0, 1, 2. In order to give you the position of the element, you make use of this count variable. Okay, so if the count is 0, then you access the very first map, and if the count is 1, you access second map, and it goes on after that. So in order to access the particular value inside it, that is very first time in the questions part, you got to display the question, right? So for that, you access its name so that you display your favorite color correctly. So in order to see if this one is working correctly, let's hot reload our application and see it's working. So it's working as intended. So what's your favorite color? What's your animal? What's your favorite age? Oh, that's my mistake. What's your age? Okay, so now it's done. Now the next question is, for some questions we got like 4 options, for some questions we got like 5 options, and for some we got 2 options. So we need to make our application display the answers dynamically. So in order to do that, it's simple, it's not complicated. So in order to do that, let's call the list here, make use of the variable that we used to declare the list. Okay, so we are calling it here, and what we got to do here is we got to map this list to widgets. Okay, so we got to display it as widgets, right? The answer in here. So in order to map it to widgets, we are making use of the map function. Okay, so inside this map function, we got to define a function in order to return it as type widget. Okay, so you can either write it outside and then call the function inside, or you can write it as anonymous function, whatever is convenient for you. I'm going to write it as anonymous function. So in order to write it as anonymous function, we are going to make use of pair of parentheses and then open and close curly brace. Okay, so here this map function it will be returning us with some values. We are going to access the answers in here, right? So let me store those values in this answers variable, and I'm going to return it to my answer widget here. Okay, so this part is done. So we are getting some errors because we are not accessing it correctly. So in order to access which map we are trying to access, in order to reach out to that position in the list, we are making use of this count variable. It is just the same what we did for questions with slight difference, that's it. So now we have reached the map, the position of the map that we are trying to access, and inside the map we got values and we got keys for that. Okay, so in the previous thing we access the keys, here we are going to access its values. So in order to access its values, what we have given the name as answers, we have given answers as the name for values, right? So we are going to enter it here. So now what error we have here is our Dart language sees the answer, that is this thing, as objects. It's not able to see it as list. Okay, it's something that happens by default. Okay, so by default Dart is not able to recognize it. Even though recognize here, Dart won't be able to recognize it over there. So in order to help our Dart to understand that we are returning it as list and all the elements of list is of type string, we can make it understand by using a keyword called as, then list of type string. So when you enter this, now Dart will recognize that you are returning something of type list and all its elements are, that is the data that returned from that list is of type string. Okay, so we are mapping all those stuff to another widget that is of type widget. So now the problem is the map, it returns everything of type iterable. Okay, by nature everything will be in type iterable, but we want everything to be of type list. So in order to do that, we can make use of dot operator here and then we can convert it to type list. Okay, so now this is done. So the very next thing that we got to handle here, and before moving further, I want to tell you is what happens here exactly is we got a list of questions, we got a list of answers. So we have accessed the questions correctly, that is we went to the position that is the element, and here in this list all the elements are maps. Okay, so this is one element, this is one element, this is one element. Okay, so we are accessing the element, and in that element that is the map, in that map we are accessing what we want to access, either the keys or values. So we are accessing the keys. Okay, so in this case we got only one value inside that key, so it's not a problem. But in the answer, and we are passing everything to the text widget and we got the result in the screen. But in here we got to dynamically get our answers as output, because for each question we got different number of options, right? Different number of answers. So we need to get the dynamic appeal. So for that, what we are doing is we are accessing the list again. Okay, so we are accessing answers this time. We are going to the position where we want to access, and for that we are making use of this count variable, and after that we are accessing the values, that is the answers. Okay, so that's what we have done in here, and we are trying to map that to widget. Okay, but the map returns everything of type iterable, so we are converting it to type list because we want everything to be of type list. Then only it will be easy for us to convert everything to answer. That is the widget that we are trying to create in here. So this is what we have done so far. In the due process, when you try to access this answers, the Dart sees it as object, so you want to make Dart to understand that it's of type list and all the values inside will be returned as string. So you are making use of this special keyword as list, and then you are typing its type as string by making use of this format in here. Okay, so that's what we have done so far, and here we are getting one another warning because here what happens is we are trying to return answers which is of type string, but we didn't handle it in here. So in order to do that, let's handle it by declaring of type string, and let's give our string a name, and let's get the value via constructor, and let's display answer dynamically in here. So now this is handled in here, but even though we get one problem in here. Okay, so what happens is we are getting list and mapping it to widgets, which is again of type list. Okay, so already we got a list in here, and again we are creating another list. That is, this list is new. The map will create new list, it won't modify any values in the existing list. So now we are trying to create a nested list because already we got a list in here, list of questions, and to that list again we are creating another set of lists. What we got to do is we got to tell our Flutter to take the elements inside the list out and display it as individual entity. So in order to do that, we will be making use of an operator called spread operator, and it can be instructed that you are using spread operator by making use of 3 dots in consecutive fashion. So what this spread operator does is it accesses your list and it takes out the elements present inside the list outside and displays it as separate entity. So no matter how many answers you have inside, that is the values you have inside, all these values will be taken outside and treated as separate elements. Okay, so when you execute this code, you will be having text as one entity, and you'll be having number of relevant answers as separate entities, and you will be seeing that one below the other. Okay, so that's the purpose of column. So since we have made use of column widget, all the options will be one below the other. Okay, so we are getting one warning here. It's because we are passing just the strings. We should also pass the function that has to be triggered when user interacts with that particular button, right? So function 1, we got to pass its instance, function 1, then answers. So now we have done what we were targeting with. So now when you execute this code, you could see, when you see what's your favorite color, you got 4 options. When you click what's your favorite animal, now you get 5 options, and the values inside the options is also changed. So now you are asking the questions and answers dynamically. So that's what we were intending to do. So this part, I know it's quite hard to understand very first time. I will also tell it once more. If you understand this, then you skip it. In the next session, we will look on developing this app further and also try to learn a bit of Dart basics, some basics that I have already told and some new basics. And now let's see fast recap what really happened in here. Okay, so what I did here is I access, in order to give dynamic appeal to our answers, I'm accessing the list. Okay, so I'm mapping the list to widgets, okay, of type widgets. In order to do that, I got to write a function, and here I have made use of anonymous function. Up till here it's function. Okay, so in this map returns some value, that is whatever it accesses in here, it returns it. So in order to get those values, I'm declaring a variable in here. Okay, so once the variable is declared in here, I'm passing that value to the answer widget that I have created in other Dart file separately. Okay, so in order to do that, what happens is the Dart language won't recognize that you are passing list. Okay, so it will be seeing you are passing some objects, but you want to get it as list. So for getting it as list, you are changing its type by saying your Dart language that this thing is list. So you are making use of the keyword as list, and then you are mentioning its type, that is of type string. So now you are successfully getting the data as list of type string via this variable, and you are passing it here. But now what we got to do is we got to convert all this to a separate list. So then only you'll be able to take take each and every set of list outside and print it as separate widgets in here, display it as separate widgets in here. So for that case, you are making use of this dot operator and converting everything to list. Okay, so now a separate list is being created because map returns everything of type iterable. Okay, so this entire thing will be of type iterable, so you are converting it to type list. Okay, that's what happening in here. Once it's converted to type list, you got to take the elements that are present inside that list, take it out and display it as separate entity. For that, you are making use of spread operator, and in order to make use of spread operator, you are making use of 3 consecutive dots. So this is what happened in here. So this sounds a bit confusing at first, but when you see this video once again, it will be clear to you. Once you have hot reloaded, this changes, and when you see the application, the number of options changes dynamically according to the question that you ask. That is, whatever you have mapped here, it changes accordingly. So our aim here is fulfilled. Let's see further basics from next session.